Hello and welcome to Men with Funny Heads, the only podcast on the internet. I am Wib and I am joined by Longfang. Say hello, Longfang.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm alive and functioning.
Which is
Mostly.
Not something we can be 100% sure of because, as people are no doubt aware, we had to miss an episode.
Yeah.
Because you were not very well.
No. Still not 100%, but I'm better than I was, so we need to get back to this shit and entertain people with sci-fi horse shit.
Yes, and the sci-fi horse shit we are going to be dealing with today is the Quatermass Experiment from 1955.
Yes.
Now, it should be noted we are dealing with the Quatermass Experiment with an X rather than an E, meaning
Although, if you actually look at it in Amazon Video, the title on the poster is Experiment just spelled with an X rather than EX, but the title on Amazon is spelled EX.
Yeah, so, okay, we'll get into this a little bit. So, the Quatermass Experiment was a 1953 BBC serial, as in it was a 6-episode long series that was broadcast live because, fucking ridiculous old TV. I think it was something to do with, they weren't sure about how unions would work about recording things and redistributing and repeating them.
Yeah, because there's then there's royalty issues and so. Cool.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Which is one of the reasons why they kind of dragged their feet over that stuff a bit, from what I understand. But yeah, it was this live sci-fi that was put on because they had a programming block to fill, and it's like, okay, that's cool. Now, it was called the Quatermass Experiment, and that original series is lost media. Most of it is, anyway. Because the first 2 episodes of it were recorded, and the way live TV was recorded back in the day was they would literally have a film camera pointed at a television set. And that would be the recording. That's how, like Doctor Who stuff was.
Yeah.
Like the recordings of the really early stuff was, that's like just how it was. Mm-hmm. Like they had to record stuff back then. But for some reason they decided to use the cheapest, shittiest camera, and so it looked like arse. And halfway through the 2nd episode, a bug landed on the screen and wouldn't leave for several minutes, effectively ruining the recording. So,
that's such a fucking BBC issue.
So they went, fuck it, and didn't record the rest of them.
Love it.
Episodes 3 to 6 will only ever be seen again if either some weirdo had somehow recorded it with their own camera, and considering the time, it would mean that it was someone presumably illegally using another TV station's camera, or we fly fucking 70 light years out and try and pick up the TV recordings. So I think it's safe to say it's pretty lost media.
I think that's fair to say.
But it was decided that they wanted to do a film adaptation of it, and this was done by Hammer, of Hammer horror fame.
Yes.
So if you've seen like the Christopher Lee Dracula stuff, it's made by those people. And they called it the Quatermass Experiment, but without the E, so it was Experiment.
Yes.
Now, the reason why they did this is not just to be edgy and weird, because this was 1955, so, it's a different time. But it was because the X certificate had just been put in, and this was under the X certificate. It's broadly speaking equivalent to an 18 certificate now, but it was for for 16 years and up to watch.
Got you.
But it's the equivalent of, it's like the highest rating that there was, the X. It was originally, apparently, it was like an H certificate for horror, but then they decided to make it more broad and make it X, and so Hammer decided to play into that by naming.
It's good advertising.
Yeah, to do that. Now, I've intentionally not spoken about any specifics of this movie at this point beyond like general stuff because I think it is really, really, really good, and
like surprisingly good.
I want you to go watch it.
Yeah,
You at
honestly,
home,
this one, please go give it a watch before you listen to this. I think it's very much worth it.
and I think it is worth doing. You can get it on. I know at least on the British Amazon Prime, it's just up there. Mm-hmm. It's like included in Prime, so it's easy to watch. Please go do it. And also, I just want to say a quick thing. That this is one of my dad's favorite sci-fis, and he listens to these podcasts. So hello, Dad. I hope we do this thing justice.
Hi there, Mr. Webb. You have a good son.
I'm all right.
You're all right. Aye.
Also, this film was released as The Creeping Unknown in the USA.
Yes.
And whatever you do not watch the trailer for it, because I found it on YouTube because it gives away the ending in the first 10 seconds.
Of course it fucking does.
It is absurd.
Yep.
But do you have anything else you want to say before we get into the episode proper?
Not really, no. Although, now that I'm looking at it, because I just wanted to see anything that IMDb says, there's mention of Toho being involved.
I am not familiar with that. I basically, because it being an old kind of influential thing, there is a lot of trivia for it that I kind of glanced over with my trivia section at the end because I have a lot of work to do and I didn't want to spend most of it writing 4 pages of notes purely about trivia.
Yes. But I just noticed their country of origin, UK, Japan.
Interesting. I'm not sure where that comes from because the special effects were all done like by Hammer.
I don't know. It could just be IMDb bollocks. You know how it is.
Yeah, we'll look into that later.
Yes. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. So, the Quatermass Experiment. The movie starts with a couple frolicking in the English countryside. They begin to literally roll in the hay,
and laugh, the same way every time, and it's really annoying.
And because it's made in the 50s, I can't tell if these people are in their early 20s or early 40s. They are somewhere between those two ages, and I couldn't say because before 1960, people just aged from being children to being 35, and it's terrifying to me.
You're not wrong, actually.
As they are rolling about in the hay, they notice something that sounds like a jet that's it's overhead, and they in a panic begin to run away, and they run to a nearby farmhouse, which turns out to actually be where the girl lives. And her father urges them into the house as the noise is getting louder of this thing that they can all see, and they're like, the bad thing.
It just doesn't show you, it only shows camera focused on them.
Yeah. So they run into the house. We hear a huge crash as an impact happens. The ceiling of the house mildly caves in a bit. But everyone's fine. The father grabs his shotgun, tells them to call the police, and goes out. Because
I just want to mention this. Both the boyfriend guy and the father of the lady are like, oh, it's probably a meteor. And then he grabs a shotgun anyway. It's like, okay.
Hey, the father is not fucking around. If an ET's coming to his fucking English town, he is going to kill the shit out of them. They just dealt with World War II. They ain't fucking around.
There's something actually to be said about that post-World War II stuff in this.
What we see, we then go outside and we see what had landed, and it's under any other circumstance, I'd say a retro-futuristic spaceship, but it was just a futuristic spaceship in 1955. So
it's awesome.
It looks exactly how you are imagining it in your mind when I say it's a rocket from 1955.
Yes.
It's great.
It's really great. I was so happy when I saw it.
It's like nose down, just buried in the mud. It's like there's smoke all around it. We then see a bunch of fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars all heading to the farmhouse, like going through the town, and like a crowd gathers. It's actually really fun because you get to see like some really old fire trucks and ambulances and stuff that are just really fascinating to see.
I was going to mention that myself, seeing like the old fire trucks with the fucking bell on it rather than the siren, and the old-fashioned, firefighter outfits and everything. There's something kind of awesome about the era that this was shot in and captures,
especially because we'll get into this a little bit later, but like the movie doesn't necessarily feel as old as it actually is. So seeing bits like that make you go, oh wow, Jesus, this really is like
this is
old.
The like you said, pre-55, so pre-60s, post World War II. It's a sort of transitionary period for a lot of things. When you think about even just the design of cars.
Yeah, like it's all before a time. It's very interesting. We then get, the firefighters talking about them, because they're all arriving at the scene. They say the rocket is too hot to put water on. I'm no firefighter. And they normally put water on fire, which is fine and quite hot. But presumably they have a reason.
Okay, I'm going to take a guess here and sort of bullshit it, but at the same time, I think my theory holds water. You know how if you get like a really, really, really hot glass and then just pour cold water on it, it just shatters to pieces?
Yeah.
I'm guessing the stress on the metal would do the same. And maybe create an explosion.
Okay, yeah. I guess that's what they're going for. Although since they don't know a lot of at this point, they don't know what it is.
I part of me thinks that if this was either a later film in color or had a bit more of a budget, we probably would have had like a heat glow or it being bright fucking orange to show it's still hot.
Yeah. It's a completely unimportant point, but it was just really funny.
We're just assholes like that.
Yeah, like we can't. we normally squirt this water on fire, but this is too hot. Like it's kind of funny. But yeah, that is presumably the explanation. We hear a newscaster who's got that lovely old British newscaster voice.
Yes.
Confirming that the ship was seen by many witnesses, and the government's line is, "It's not dangerous, but you should stay away from it."
Please keep your distance. It's fine though.
We're then introduced to the sort of main like most of the main cast, who all arrive in a VW camper van, which is quite funny.
Yes,
like an old one, like the original.
It's one of the original style ones, yeah.
We've got the main character, which is Professor Bernard Quatermass, who is an American scientist working for the British Experimental Rocket Group.
Yes.
I love the British Experimental Rocket Group because its acronym is BERG.
Good.
And it's so it's him and the rest of his entourage. I'll introduce those in a moment. But they're all arriving in this camper van. He's being chastised for what's happening. We find out that this rocket was actually the first manned flight into space. Going 1,500 miles into space, to be exact, which is pretty fucking far, considering that the first real-world manned space flight, the Vostok 1, which was done 6 years later, only got like just 100 or so miles.
Oh, right, okay. I was trying to work
space.
out, like, I'm bad at distances at the best times, and I was trying to work out. That's a handy comparison, thank you.
Yeah. They know something's gone wrong because it went out of contact 57 hours previous, which again shows how long it was in space, because the Vostok 1, its full flight only lasted 108 minutes.
Yeah.
So, like, this was made before and based on a serial from even further before.
Yeah.
Man had actually been to space. So I'm not pointing at anything,
the
saying
fun
they've done
thing
something
about
wrong.
the fun thing about old sci-fi is that the concepts could be more wacky and no one would be a dick about it.
And I mean, who could prove them wrong at this point? Like,
Yeah,
like
it's like
oh,
didn't have
that's
to be completely like if you were completely scientifically accurate, you wouldn't have a story here.
Oh, your science fiction just basically 90% of it wouldn't exist. So
Yeah.
But what we find out is that Quatermass was, the one behind all this. They launched it without really telling anyone, and he's also the one that initiated the landing after it went out of like radio contact. They arrive at the field, and a handful of people exit the vehicle. One of which is Judith Caroon, the wife of one of the astronauts in the rocket, who wanders straight past the police barricade. Who put up like minimal resistance whilst complaining.
The fucking copper was basically just, hey, no, please don't. Oh, bye.
Oh no, you're going past. Oh no. The camper van then just drives through, making Judith's kind of nonchalant barging kind of redundant, but whatever.
It's whatever, it's fine.
Quatermass's assistant, a guy called Marsh, tries to contact the crew in the ship using the radio whilst they're all waiting for it to cool down a bit.
Did you notice where the radio was in the camper?
I presume... Was it in the front?
No.
So, where was it? I wasn't even paying attention.
It was in the back.
You mean where the engine is?
Yes.
Huh.
They clearly just put a big box over where the engine sits.
Okay. Excellent. I didn't even notice that one. They say that if they the reason why they don't want to open it up at this point is because if they open it up while it's so hot on the outside, then the hot air would rush inside and incinerate the crew. Let us know in the comments if that is based on any real science, because I don't understand like thermodynamics that well.
Decompression and all that shit. Like, I don't fucking know.
Like, would that happen? I don't know. It could do. That could be. I don't know.
It works for the story.
One of the other members of the group is a guy called Blake, who is a representative of the Ministry of Defence, who kind of bickers with Quatermass because the rocket was launched before he got permission. And
I'm just going to stop you there for a second, Webb. Everyone bickers with Quatermass because the man is an asshole.
Oh yeah, Quatermass is the protagonist, but he's also a dickhead.
He's an absolute irredeemable prick.
Yeah. Quatermass just responds to like being told that he launched before he got permission. He's like, well, you took too long. I made my own decision. Saying that science is always a risk, and the people in the rocket knew that. And that, even if they're all dead, they'll still be heroes, and it'll fire up people's imagination, and there'll be 100 more people willing to go up in the next one.
Yeah, I'm sure that helps a lot. Yeah.
And like you can't stop it now. You can't stop progress. To which Blake just goes, "You mean I can't stop you now?" And he's like, "That's right."
There's something to be said about the fact that Quatermass is played by an American. That's all.
There's a whole reason for that. I'll go into that later.
Oh, good. Yes.
Marsh finally hears a little something on the radio, a bit of a tapping, so they know at least someone's alive inside. They try to speak to them, but they don't actually get an answer, and then the tapping stops. And so they decide to open up the rocket despite the risk to the people inside, because it sounds like they're about to die.
Yeah.
So the firemen all point their hoses at the rocket, waiting for it to open, and the whole
do get
an
amazing scene of all the firefighters like doing their fucking drill, basically.
Yeah.
I love it. Makes me happy.
So the door is opened, like, remotely, and the firemen douse the thing in water. A single man in a funky 1950s spacesuit.
I love it.
Falls out of the rocket and then just falls unconscious. Fortunately, the man who falls out is Victor Caroon, Judith's husband. Fortunate, since nobody else's spouse was there, and it would have been really awkward if it had been anyone else.
God. I'm just imagining that she runs, like, Mrs. Caroon runs over, sees it's one of the other guys, and then just walks away again.
It's like, oh no, you're not the right one. Quatermass, Marsh, and Blake head into the rocket and find 2 fully sealed spacesuits, but with nobody in them, and no trace of the other 2 astronauts. There's a fun little neat demonstration of the kind of rotating cabin thing.
Yes.
Basically to establish why, like, the whole cabin, like, revolves around, presumably so that they can make it so it's the right way up, because the rocket's, like, nose down in the ground.
Yeah.
So it'd be weird if it was upside down.
It's one of those, like, gyro-stabilized thingamabobs. It's fine.
Yeah. I think it's just so that they didn't have to build the set upside down, because then they'd have to, like, glue chairs to the roof and it'd be really annoying.
Yeah. Speaking of which, this entire set is great.
It's a decent little set, honestly. It does, because it's quite grounded in, like, the tech of the time. It's not... The spacesuits that they're wearing are a bit futuristic-y.
Yeah.
But that's, like, the only really, like... really sci-fi looking element. Everything else they try and keep relatively grounded. And I think that really adds to this movie, like, how seriously it kind of takes everything. Even when it's doing silly bollocks, it's still kind of fun, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
It takes its silly bollocks seriously. Is I guess the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
It grounds it, and I think it's really good. So they adjust the little gyroscope thing, and so it kind of. It stops being at a slight angle and goes perfectly straight again, the whole room does. The instruments tell them that the doors have not been opened until just now, and they grab the onboard camera hoping that it had some answers, but it seems to be pretty badly damaged. Rushing out to the ambulance, Victor has been put into. Quatermass tries to ask him what happened to the other 2 crew, which is Reichenheim and Green.
Yes.
But Victor just stares blankly at him. He's, like, conscious, and he's obviously aware of things around him, but he seems to be in, like, an extreme shock.
I really think the actor who was playing Victor kind of nailed it.
Yeah, he does a fantastic...
He looks legit, like, haunted.
Yeah, he does a great job in this movie. The last member of the group who I haven't named yet is Dr. Briscoe, who's, like, the physician for the crew. He basically tells, like, Quatermass, look, he's in no condition to talk, as Victor quietly whispers, "Help me," to the doctor. We don't actually see that. He kind of whispers it into his ear. We see he's like got his fists are clenched and shaking. He's not in a good way. Like, Victor's not good.
No, Victor is unwell. Victor needs help.
We then get a small little montage of newspapers, spinning at the camera, letting us know about the rocket test and saying that, Quatermass doesn't want there to be any kind of police investigation of the missing crew. We cut to the office of a police inspector, Lomax, who's complaining about the situation and shaving with this ancient electric razor.
I love this entire intro sequence for this guy, because, the other officer comes in and gives him this wee box, and we think, oh, it's something important. No, it's just setting up for this electric shaver that plugs into his light.
Like, I won't bring it up again, because it's, like, not actually important to the overarching story, but there's kind of a running little gag running through the movie of him trying to shave and failing.
Yes.
Of things interrupting him shaving. This is, the first kind of time that happens. We discover that the fellow officer who's with him, in a panic, trying to get information of what's happened, just took Victor's fingerprints on the basis of, you never know, and said that touching him was like shaking hands with a block of ice.
Yes.
At this point, Quatermass shows up and says, he won't have the police in his lab treating Victor like he's a criminal, because they don't know what's going on. The police are obviously like, 2 people are missing. We have to investigate.
Here's the thing about Lomax. He's incredibly reasonable.
He is most reasonablest man.
Yeah. He's like, okay, mate, I understand that you have your own investigations to do, but 2 people are missing, and we need to know what happened.
The fact that he
Quatermass is just...
He manages to like, reasonable logic his way into dealing with Quatermass, who is an unreasonable man.
Yeah.
Like, says how reasonable he is.
Yeah.
And at this point, like, Quatermass is like, look, I'm just going to give you the files on the crew so you don't have to treat them like this, because the only useful investigation right now is going to be a scientific one. And he leaves.
Which I do not entirely agree with, but okay.
It's, yeah. Back at the Quatermass's lab, Victor is being checked out by Dr. Briscoe. He's, like, in a chair, and he's just staring blankly out into the room. And you see his, like, he's got a haunted expression. There's like a lot of makeup done on him to, like, really emphasize the bone structure of his face.
Yeah, he's very gaunt.
Checking out his vitals, Briscoe says he just shouldn't be alive, and you can see that his skin in certain places is swollen strangely, and that his bone structure seems to have subtly changed. Judith, his wife, arrives and points out, Victor should be in a hospital. Briscoe agrees, saying that he doesn't have the right equipment to do anything with him. Quatermass concedes that, yeah, he probably should be in a hospital, but they couldn't do anything more than we could, and we understand the environment he's been in. Basically, you kind of get the whole thing of that Quatermass is a control freak and wants to be in charge of everything at all times and doesn't like anyone else being an expert around him.
Yeah, I do have a note. Well, a couple of notes here. One, is Victor's wife's voice ADR'd by someone else or something? Because she sounds off.
Yes, if I remember correctly, she's an American actress and she was dubbed.
Got it.
Because apparently she wasn't very good.
Fair.
There's a whole thing about... I don't want to get too deep into it because it's all, like, gossipy nonsense, but there's people... This is from the era of some people being put into movies because they're sleeping with people.
Got you. The old studio system stuff.
Yeah, old studio bullshit. And that's... Yeah. It's a whole thing.
Okay, that's out of the way. Second of all, my next note, why is everyone but Quatermass reasonable?
Yeah. I think it kind of works well because it shows him as just being this, like, Quatermass is an unstoppable force. And he's like, what's like, because he's not like an anti-hero or like even an anti-villain. He's like, he's a chaotic neutral character. He's just going to do what he's doing.
He's Victor Frankenstein.
I guess. He's like slightly less nefarious.
Yeah, but it's that like endless pursuit of knowledge and science and not really giving a shit about anything else.
Yeah, he's like just so single-minded that morality just isn't a thing that concerns him.
It's like that. Like Victor is clearly suffering and not well, and Briscoe's like, mate, I need to get him to a hospital because he needs like actual help with good equipment and not the shit I have in a lab.
But anyway, Quatermass says, like, would a hospital know how to deal with a man who's been exposed to rocket radiation? Which is a sentence.
Yes, it is.
I don't know what rocket radiation is specifically, but whatever.
But it sounds good.
It sounds impressive. I assume they're actually talking about, like, space, like cosmic radiation, but this is 1955. Like, we literally hadn't sent a man into space yet.
Yeah, there's probably, like, especially for like the layman or just a director or writer, they wouldn't know.
Yeah. After a bit of back and forth, Briscoe agrees to try a little bit longer, sort of working with Victor, and Quatermass asks Judith to stay with him. Victor, throughout this whole scene, is just completely blankly staring dead ahead. But as Judith puts some flowers she's brought to him in the sink, just to pour some water on them, you see it does briefly arouse his attention, as, like, when no one's looking, he kind of, like, looks over and starts to, like, try and motion towards her and the flowers. And you're like, okay.
And his facial expressions fucking nail this, like, dread kind of...
Yeah, apparently he was told to, like, always hold back 10% of what he wanted to do. That was like his direction he was given.
Okay.
Because basically they were like, yeah, this could get really goofy really easily.
Yeah, I think they hit a really good level then in that case.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
We then get to Quatermass heading back into his office, where Inspector Lomax is already in there and just looking at his stuff.
Yep.
Lomax returns the files on the pilots, and Quatermass tries to just brush him off. Lomax has this like kind of fun little saying, which is like, nobody ever wins a Cold War. One of us better come over to the other side. You don't want to come over to me? I'm not proud. I'll come over to yours, because everyone is unreasonably. They are unreasonably reasonable to the unreasonable Quatermass at all times.
I do have a note here, actually. First of all, Lomax is like a sassy dickhead to Quatermass. It's great. They make a really good foil. Like, it's awesome. The way these two talk to each other and actually like interrupt each other mid-sentence is not something I'd expect from the time.
Yeah, when I watched this, it felt like a movie from like it just like 10 years later. The dialogue in this feels really natural for a movie from this time, and it's just I was watching it and it was just, again, it's that stuff that really lends credence to it being more grounded, and you take the silly sci-fi shit that happens in it way more seriously because it's treated with this like very realistic kind of tone. Honestly, when I said you should watch this movie, if you still haven't gone off and watched this movie, Please watch it now. Pause this. Give us a like if you're on YouTube.
That would be great. Thanks. Yeah, do that.
Go and watch it before we spoil things majorly. Because seriously, I think this movie's great.
I will record personalized ASMR things for everyone that likes. I don't fucking know.
You just records this sensuous way of going, you should all watch the Quatermass Experiment.
Go watch the Quatermass Experiment, everyone. It's really good shit, honestly. There you go.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
I also have a note here, and I don't like. It's always relevant with this film, but I just like that it's here, all in caps. Quatermass, you're a fucking sociopath.
Yeah. Basically, the reason why Lomax is there is because he wants confirmation that Victor's fingerprints from the file really are his, because the ones they took from him after the crash are all weird and blotchy. They're not like human fingerprints.
It kind of looks like they're almost like it's burned.
Yeah, it looks
skin or something. It's all segmented in big blotches.
It's really weird. At this point, Quatermass is called over to the crash site, and Lomax just kind of follows along with him, because I think Quatermass is just sort of... He doesn't like Lomax, but I think his reasonableness has at least meant that Quatermass tolerates him now.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a line there of like, what is effectively, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember Lomax just saying, do you mind if I tag along? Quatermass does not fucking respond. And Lomax is like, okay, then cool. And then just follows him anyway.
Yeah. It's either that or Quatermass has just accepted he's not getting rid of him, and he's like, I guess this is just a thing now.
I legitimately really like Lomax in this film as a counter to Quatermass's bullshit.
Inside the we cut to inside the rocket where Marsh has been investigating it, and he shows Quatermass, Lomax, and Briscoe, who's also shown up, this strange organic material that they found like in the deep recesses of like the crew compartment. It's like this weird jelly stuff. Lomax also asks for a sample, and they're like, "Yeah, sure." And they're just like, "Okay, so we know we're missing a person. Well, we're missing two people. In this sealed unit, we found a bunch of possibly organic jelly stuff. We have no idea what's happened." And Quatermass has this little speech where it's like, "Something happened in here, something beyond our understanding at the moment. If I only knew where to begin." Marsh points out that, well, the film in the camera might help, because even though the camera was damaged, they did manage to get the film out of it, and it's currently being processed. He didn't tell Quatermass this, so Quatermass is like, what? What? It's go get it
You
processed
did something
now.
without my express consent or control in this matter? How dare you, slap?
Yeah, he's like, no, you need to go get it processed. Rubble.
I don't care how much it costs, get every, lead... What is it? Developer in the country to check over this film and make sure it comes out right and all this stuff.
So back at the lab, Briscoe is working late with Victor and Judith sleeping in the next room. Quatermass comes in to ask about the jelly that has been, analysed. Briscoe's response is fantastic, which is just, it's harmless, it's organic, it's jelly, end of analysis.
I like Briscoe as well. Honestly, these are all great characters.
It's saying that it might be the remnants of dead tissue, possibly human, but they can't be sure. The implication's apparent that could be the remnants of the crew. They kind of bicker about that for a bit. And in the background, we see Victor get up, reaching for some flowers that were placed beside his bed, but falls over, knocking them off the table. Waking up Judith, who comes in to shout for help.
Mm-hmm.
Briscoe and Quatermass, finding him on the floor, haul him back up into bed, noticing that, his skin is continuing to just kind of change, and it's starting to look really, he's looking even more gaunt, and,
mm-hmm.
The odd,
It's a sort of, almost dry skin effects. It looks kind of leathery almost, and their veins are very clear under it. It's a really nice effect that's not too out there.
Judith is furious at this point, saying, he would be better off dead. Better off if he died rather than being saved for just your future experiments. Really hammering home, no one likes Quatermass.
He's a dick.
And that he is being,
I straight up don't know why anyone works for them.
I think because he's very, very smart. Fun fact,
yeah.
I think it's in one of the unused concepts for a prequel.
Okay.
He was supposed to go and work with Werner von Braun. In Nazi Germany in a prequel.
Oh.
So that's a thing.
Well.
So whilst Judith is bickering and shouting very justifiably at Quatermass,
yes.
Briscoe's out the room and just calls for an ambulance, basically saying, he's going to a hospital. Fuck you.
Yeah. It's like, mate, no, I'm not dealing with this. Get him somewhere with specialists that may be able to do more than me.
Quatermass begrudgingly agrees, but says that he needs to be in complete isolation with nobody allowed to see him. The implication there being even Judith.
Yeah.
We then cut to Marsh, who's in the photo lab, where the technician is looking at the footage and is like, "Oh, this is terrible. Look how grainy it is." He's basically like me when I'm going over footage for a video, and I'm like, "Oh, we can't use this. No, I've got to redo all this. No, it's terrible. We can't put this out." And Marsh is like, "It doesn't matter. Just give it to me.
Footage."
This is evidence. It doesn't matter if it's got good lighting.
I love how just done with this shit Marsh is, and the guy's like, "Oh no, but my boss would not be amused if it."
We can't put out a low quality product like this. Oh
yeah, does he not legit say that?
Something like that. He's akin to that. It's great. Then we go to the non-photo lab, as in Quatermass's lab, where Quatermass has summoned Lomax and Blake and explained the situation vis-a-vis the jelly and how Victor has had to be quarantined. And they all agree, we can't tell the public yet. We got to kind of wait for things to move on a little bit. They then all go to watch the film that Marsh has brought in. Now, this is filmed with no sound, so the only real sound during the scene, apart from the occasional interjections of characters, is just the sound of a projector going.
I love it.
We see the pilot, so we see footage from inside the ship, from inside the room that we see earlier on. We see the pilots kind of fucking around in zero G, as much as they could on a set in 1955.
Quote unquote zero G.
Yeah, it's quite fun. It's like walks up the wall and stuff.
Yeah.
It shows that the system periodically cuts to the instrument panels, so the video footage cuts like however often it is. So it shows the instruments so they can see that everything's fine, and then cuts back. That's just a conceit of it. We then see the rocket begin to violently shake. The crew start to check the readings, and we see them donning their spacesuits with the unreasonably large shoulder pads.
Yes.
They then all look to the back of the rocket as if, like, basically where the camera is from. Like, they're looking past the camera as if they can see something off camera, like in shock. And the screen goes all wibbly.
That's actually... I couldn't work out how to actually describe that. Wibbly is the best way of doing that. Nice job.
And it seems to hurt one of them, and it causes him to collapse. A second wibbly happens, and another one collapses. You'll notice that the two people who collapse are in the positions that the empty spacesuits were in when the ship was opened later. The third man, who would be Victor, goes to check on them, but he's hit by the third wibbly, his very own wibbly. That just causes him to back away in fear as the film cuts to white. Mm-hmm. This whole scene, because it plays out with no sound, just with the sound of the projector, is so eerie.
Yeah.
And because you don't really see anything, again, it's like you're really starting to see, because this was before Hammer made nothing but horror films.
Yeah, like this is before Hammer went colour and had like bright red blood and cleavage everywhere. When it hit its stride, basically. I
don't think we mention it, but it should be obvious. But yeah, it's a 1955 movie. It's black and white, so and yeah, it just has there's just a spooky tone to it, because again, it's this adding realism to it.
Yeah, it's a spooky but very, very somber tone. Of people just like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. Can we fix it? What should we do? All that sort of stuff. It's not like the big hero or anything.
And I do like how we're up to this point, and it still doesn't really like tell you what's happened or anything.
No, it doesn't for a while.
The movie kind of keeps its cards quite close to its chest, and it's only as it goes on it really starts to unveil what's happening. And I like that about it.
Yeah.
We then go to the hospital where Victor is being treated. Judith enters to speak to the receptionist there, who she basically guilt trips into allowing her, because she obviously can't see Victor, but guilt trips him into saying, like, when does one of the orderlies come off who's like looking after him, like the night nurse looking after him rather.
Yeah.
Like, when does he get off shift so I can speak to him to ask about my husband? And the guy's like, okay, this is go here, this is where he takes his break, you can get to him there, like, he's off his shift in like half an hour, so but if anyone asks you what you're doing, I didn't tell you.
Just want to point out, male nurse in 1955.
Oh yeah.
That'll come up in a second, because I need to talk about this.
Okay. She then, goes like the direction she's been directed to go, but then goes out of a staff exit where she picks up a private detective in her car outside, who she's paying to pretend to be a nurse to go and get Victor. This private dick then sneaks inside and...
After making jokes about the fact that nurses wear trousers now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, fuck that guy. I think he's actually meant to be a doctor, but I don't fucking know. Or an orderly, whatever.
Oh yeah, well the private dick wanders inside and
very much a dick.
Yeah, he relieves the previous nurse, the nurse who basically nearly double checks to make sure something's not going wrong, but gets distracted by flirting with two other nurses.
Yep. To go out for Chinese food.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, like, all right, fine.
So the private dick manhandles Victor up and gets him dressed. We also kind of established that his name is Christy, because he's like, oh, let Christy help you.
He's slimy as fuck, isn't he?
Yeah, he really is.
Like-
Victor is looking intently at a cactus in the room, like, really intently.
Like, it's legitimately uncomfortable the way he's staring at that cactus, and I don't
Like-
mean in like a fun, jokey way, like he's gonna fuck the cactus. It's just weird.
I mean, he might fuck the cactus, you don't know. His look is of such intenseness. You're like, what is he going to do to that cactus? Because at this point, everything is on the table.
Yep.
Christy goes out to check if the coast is clear to go and get to the lift, or elevator, if you don't happen to live in Britain.
Oh, fuck.
As he's gone, we see with a pained expression, Victor raises his shaking fist, and the camera kind of pans up to focus on his face, and he slams his hand down on the cactus. Like, we don't see what's happened with the cactus, we don't see his hand hit it, but we see it, and it focuses on this expression of anguish and pain on his face, and then you see him like
whimpering, pain sounds, not a scream, just a sort of whimper.
And then he casts the pot aside, which smashes against the wall. And Christy comes back in as Victor's got his hand hidden inside his jacket. And he he maneuvers Victor into the lift. And as it's going down, he's like, what you got? What you got? What you got there? What are you hiding in there? Like, and Victor's like, not responsive initially, and he's like, no, seriously, what have you got there? And he tries to pull his hand out, and Victor kind of rounds on him, and you realize Victor towers over him.
Yeah,
and we don't see what happens, but we see here, you can see him pull his hand out of his jacket, which you don't see the hand, and raises it over Christy, who. Then, we see, just him with a horrified expression on his face, and Victor, we hear the sound of Victor slamming his hand down on him.
Yeah. It's dark as fuck.
Victor then exits the lift alone, where he's found by Judith, who, once again, he's got his hand in his jacket.
Yeah.
Who ushers him into the car.
Can we talk about how great that entire bit was?
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's the fact that there wasn't any spectacle, or it was very matter of fact what happened to Christy.
Yeah.
Arm up, arm down, big dull thump sound. That was it. There's something more effective to me about that than it would be if it was a gore fest.
100%. But saying that, as he's being driven off, a nurse stumbles into the elevator and trips over the corpse of Christy, who is desiccated.
Yep.
You can see where he, his skull is
half of his face is just skull.
It's melted, and his hands are shriveled up. He's it's really quite gruesome for the time. It's not bloody, but it's like a body in advanced stages of decomposition style thing.
Yeah.
But obviously happened in moments. It's really good effects work. It's later on in my notes, but I have made a note of the person that did all the special effects.
Oh, good
job to them.
Yeah, seriously, no, great job. And this is apparently a limited budget film as well. They did a lot of good stuff.
Yeah,
I think this is another reason why I like it being in the era it's in black and white. You can get away with a lot more special effects stuff without it coming off as too cheesy.
Absolutely.
Or looking off. And for the most part, any special effect in this thing, other than a couple of bits and bobs, look really effective. They really get the point across and don't seem like a Star Trek alien from the 60s,
It has a lot more. There's I think there's only one effect in the whole thing that I didn't think was pretty good.
Yeah.
Which says a lot. Even the occasional composite shots and things they do are still all pretty good for the time.
Yeah, they're inoffensive, I guess. You don't really think about or notice them being awful, which is what you'd want out of a composite shot.
Yeah, and especially given or even the effects that don't look good by modern standards would have looked great at the time. So
aye,
yeah. Anyway, back in the car with Judith and Victor, she's driving off saying, like, look, we're going to go and get you the best doctors. We can make a new life away from Quatermass. You know, again, alluding to his kind of overbearing nature, as Victor is just staring intently at her the whole time, like his hand still hidden in his jacket. Sensing something's really wrong with him, she stops the car and is like, is your hand okay? He then brings his hand out, and we briefly kind of see that there's something mutilated and malformed about his hand, but it's all in shadows and you can't really see it. Judith just screams, and he grabs his coat and just exits the car, sort of shuffling off into the night.
And she's left there.
Just screaming.
Screaming. And screaming. And screaming. That's great. Also, did you notice that she did not give a fuck about the fact that Christie was not with him?
Yeah, I think she just kind of was like, well, I think it was like established she'd already paid him, so...
Aye, she was just like, fuck it then.
She probably just assumed he's just fucked off somewhere.
Yeah,
and he's like,
okay.
Well, he was a dick anyway, so, like, whatever. He's paid. He's delivered his end of the bargain. He's probably just... Yeah.
Fair.
Speaking of Christie, back at the hospital, Quatermass, Lomax, and Briscoe are all investigating his body and saying, yeah, the life looks like it's been sucked out of him. By this point, Judith has been found in the car, like she's traumatized.
Yeah.
And like she was just found by someone, and she was just there muttering about a hand that was grey and thorny like a cactus.
I think it's mentioned she was just sort of like, muttering and moaning.
Yeah, like she's traumatized. She's not right.
This movie goes places, man.
Oh, yeah. They go into Victor's hospital room and they find the remnants of the plant pot, but not much of the cactus itself. Warnings are sent out all over London that Victor Caroon is on the loose, and a big search is mounted to try and find him.
Nice little montage of the police like being sent out, and the board with all the numbers on it of like what cops are where and stuff. Yeah.
There's a few little bits like that of where you see you get to see a lot of old London as well, like, you know, from this time, because I don't know if it's established it, but this is set in London. Like, I think the movie sort of just assumes at a certain point you understand it's in London.
Yeah.
But whatever. He probably does say it earlier on, like explicitly, and I just didn't notice it because I knew it.
Possibly, I don't remember it
because I just knew it was in London. So, like, I didn't necessarily consciously acknowledge when they established that.
Yeah.
But we then see Briscoe doing an autopsy of Christie, and it's pretty grim. His bones and his face have like been turned to powder, and there's like traces of half plant tissue. Quatermass is questioning, you know, if the rocket could have maybe encountered some kind of life out in space, like something that doesn't need a planet, something that's like made of energy, and that somehow got to Victor. And they're sort of like just postulating wildly here.
Yeah, they're totally spitballing of how could something affect biological function like this, and what would it have to be to get into a sealed spaceship and all that.
And yeah, and this is like, I think, one of the weakest little scenes because they have to just bullshit their way to the real conclusion.
Yeah, I would rather they just didn't.
I think if they just had not established that they had kind of worked out what was going on, I think it would be stronger.
Mm-hmm.
You hear this 1955 being an influential sci-fi movie. We can write this better than you with the benefit of hindsight. They sort of like go, this seems to have got into Victor, and it would making him like a carrier of it, and it seems to be able to combine life forms like animal and plant, and that it's probable that this would be able to reproduce, but first it must have food.
Yep.
I guess it does establish the rest of the movie, so I guess it serves a function, but it's like the most them just...
It could have been easier for them just to say that he was mutated by cosmic rays.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, something's happened, and like, if he's absorbed stuff from him, so he needed to feed, and if something needs to feed, Does that
it
mean
might
it's
reproduce?
yeah?
You know?
I think that'd be a better way of doing it, but whatever.
Yeah. But then again, it was a film made in the fucking 50s, so what right do we have to really give it shit?
Yeah, exactly. We then cut to a chemist or a pharmacist, depending on whatever. And we see Victor kind of stumble up to the door of it and attempt to gain entry. The chemist, who assumes he's a customer, lets him in, but Victor bursts his way through and is frantically searching the shelves, knocking stuff off, and he's visibly distraught. And the chemist starts chastising him, doesn't physically try and restrain him. He's just oh, now what do you think you're doing?
Get away from there. You don't know what you're doing with that.
But then he sees how distressed Victor is, and then tries to earnestly start helping him. He's like, are you okay? Are you in pain? Your arm?
Yeah.
Are you all right?
I can help. Let me have a look and stuff like that.
He's genuinely lovely.
Yeah.
Really honestly trying to help Victor, and he removes the jacket off Victor's arm, and we see what's happened to his arm. It's this weird, spiky mass of flesh. That's, obviously he's absorbed the spikiness from the cactus, and we know from earlier that it's grey is the colour of it. And apparently the cast for that was taken from a guy whose hand had really severe arthritis.
Oh.
And that's where they got the basic shape from and then modified it from there.
Interesting.
Which is that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I think this is the one effect of the whole movie that doesn't look great. Because it does just look like a Doctor Who effect.
Yeah.
And Doctor Who had no money. So,
when you put it the way you did, I get what they were going for, it just didn't really work out, sadly.
Yeah, but again, this is just a time period thing. And I don't think it makes the movie worse, but it's just that's the one effect I don't think works well.
Mm-hmm.
But then he rounds upon the pharmacist and then attacks him. And, we don't see specifically, but, we cut to a phone ringing at Lomax's house. Whilst he's shaving, reporting the attack, and he's forced to leave. And they actually have what I think is a really nice, very real conversation with his wife.
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
About him.
They have, legit banter and chemistry together.
So what we're going to do about dinner is put it on and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a very, having known, my older grandparents and things back in, a while back. And it feels very much like that kind of relationship. And I don't know, it was just a very real, very believable conversation that really helped flesh out, because there's that kind of, there was a bit of a low grade 50s sexism thing in an earlier scene where he's I'm going out, we're having dinner with the wife tonight because it's payday. So she's always my biggest fan then.
Yeah.
But this kind of establishes it kind of being a bit more of a playful banter thing, and I don't know, I just really like
the two of them sort of rib each other, and it's nice.
Yeah. Again, if you can't tell, I really like this movie.
It's a very good movie.
We then go to the chemist in the aftermath. Shit's smashed all over the place. Briscoe finds a bowl containing a mix of chemicals, and Quatermass is like, what do you think he's trying to do with it? And he's like, well, I kind of hope he was trying to kill himself, because this would kill a normal person. But he's like, but I kind of fear that it's intended to speed up whatever process that is happening to Victor.
Yeah.
And the knowledge of that is something Victor absolutely wouldn't have, because he was a pilot. He wasn't a chemist. So, yeah. Lomax kind of comes down because he was there as well, of course. And he's like, the kettle was still on, so, the fact that chemist
should be around.
He should be around. And they notice something from behind one of the doors in there, which they didn't check because they're terrible at police work, apparently. And they bring a constable in with his silly hat.
Say what you want, I still like those hats. I don't know why. They're totally fucking pointless, but they're cool.
The old British Bobby hat is so silly.
Yeah. It's...
and they open up the door expecting to find Victor, I think, but then the chemist dead falls out, and he is similarly desiccated like Christie, and they very briefly show you like his like caved in, desiccated skull again. And I think the fact is
kind of deformed, desiccated hands.
Yeah, and like because they so briefly show the skull, I think again it really hammers home the horror of what you're seeing.
Yeah, they don't linger on anything that would end up like looking too cheesy if you spent too long on it in this film. Even with the like messed up hand that we both said like wasn't the best effect, they don't linger on it long enough for you to get a like really good look at it.
Yeah. We then go down by a river where Victor's kind of stumbling around, sobbing, like you can see that his like mental state is just he's a wreck.
You get the impression that the human part of him is in like intense pain and distress.
Yeah.
Whatever's left of that human side.
Yeah, he stumbles into an old narrowboat. If you're not familiar with narrowboats, I don't know are they common in other countries? Or is are narrowboats a uniquely British thing?
Well, narrowboats, canal boat type stuff. I would imagine it's in other countries as well, but it seems to us like a very British thing.
They're basically these like very like the hull is like flat on the bottom because they go through canals. They're very long and very thin.
Before trains became the biggest way of getting stuff around the Victorian era, a lot of it was narrowboats.
Yeah,
going up and down canals, through landlocked areas, basically.
And loads of people still use them now, just as like people will have them as like just a little boat to kind of get around on in canals that are all over the country. And stuff like that. And yeah, you have holidays on canal boats and things. It's a whole thing. I just thought I'd explain it because I'm not sure how common this is in other countries.
No, I agree there. I don't know.
But it's like an old like cargo container, one of those, and he like. They say it's abandoned later on, and he goes and gets like shelter in one of those for the night. The next morning,
curls up in a ball.
Yeah, just fetal position. Like the next morning, we see a young girl who is who's like taking her doll in a pram, like down by the river to have a picnic.
I hate this entire scene, by the way. I hate kids in movies so much.
Her having a conversation with her doll and like, would you like some tea and all that, wakes Victor up, who gets out of it, and the girl immediately is like, oh, do you want to stay for tea? And if you've seen Frankenstein, the original Frankenstein, you're very worried at this point again because this movie does not have chill, so you don't know what the fuck is going to happen here.
This, to me, is more uncomfortable than the Frankenstein scene.
Oh, it is. It is. Especially because we've seen the level of gruesomeness of what's happened to the other people.
Whereas, like, the Frankenstein's monster is, like, more childlike.
And, yeah. Even though Frankenstein's monster does kill the girl, it's done in such a weird way.
It's done in a way of, like... The monster doesn't quite understand what the fuck it's just done.
Yeah, you only understand how brutal it was afterwards. But so yeah, you're going to this scene and you're worried. She like holds out the doll, like saying, like, "Oh, Dolly would like you to stay." And then he just bats.
Note. Incredibly terrifying looking doll.
I mean, all old dolls look horrifying. So.
Oh, this one's a bad one though. It's busted up to shit.
Yeah. Being knocked out of her hands by Victor doesn't help it. It like beheads the doll.
Yep.
And it kind of just, we just see a long shot of the girl just standing there, just alone, as Victor's like ran off again, distraught. Because obviously you can tell he obviously was fighting with himself to not do anything.
Attack the child.
Yeah, and he gets away, like batting away the doll was the best case scenario there. Yeah. We then cut back to the police station as they're lamenting that like they've been getting tons of false sightings of Victor all over London.
Oh, not just London.
Well, just all over the place.
They mention Liverpool and Orkney.
Oh yeah, shit, they do, yeah. And they get in a report of the doll beheading. And it's not actually being reported as a sighting of Victor, but the description matches him. So they're like, okay, that one might be real.
Yeah.
They call up the police, like, really search that area. The passage of time goes really fast over this next handful of bits. Like, several days actually pass by.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Because that was, like, first thing in the morning, and now we cut to, like, that night. As we see, like, a security guard or warden or something, like, locking up in a zoo for the night, saying goodnight to all the animals. It's kind of adorable.
I love it so much.
Like, he goes up to, like, a monkey and is like, oh, I thought I saw you in the tea rooms earlier, but it turned out it was just a customer.
Yeah. Like, that is a guy that clearly likes his job and loves the animals that he deals with.
Yeah, it's just
very cute.
And so he's locking up everything, and he bikes off, and it's quite a long kind of time passes as we see the animals start to get a little bit more panicked, and it starts zooming in ominously on a bush. More panicked animals, and we zoom in even closer, and we see a bit of Victor. You don't get a clear shot of him. You see kind of just a bit like around his eyes, and you can see that he's even more mutated than the last time we saw him. Yeah. And you see
again,
him,
very, very smartly not actually showing the entire thing.
He exits from the bush, and we only really see shadows of him from this point on. As he's like moving across the zoo, and we see the animals in various states of distress.
We're in like point of view as well.
Yeah, as it fades to black. The next morning,
I should note, no music at all. Like, nothing, just silence and the sounds of the animals.
There's not actually much music in the movie overall.
No, there's not, and I think it really helps.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things that really helps, like, lend a reality to what's going on.
Yeah.
And so the next morning, there's animals dead all over the zoo, desiccated like the people.
Noticed either specifically mentioned or on screen. I saw it was either a cheetah or a leopard. I'm not quite sure. A lion and antelopes.
Yeah. The antelope, it says it's an antelope, but it's totally just the type of deer that we get in Britain.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But yeah, and they're saying, yeah, all these things are gone. Quatermass and Co. like show up, and they're like, you need to shut the zoo down. And the people who run the zoo are like, it's fine, because they'd already opened the zoo. They just cordoned off the areas covered in dead animals. Because
that people could see.
Yeah, if I was running a zoo, and like someone had obviously got in and murdered like a stack of the animals, I probably wouldn't open that morning.
No.
I'd clean up the dead animals first.
And maybe have a little bit of a fucking investigation.
Maybe.
If you have the time, like...
Yeah, so they're like... So, the people who were, for some reason, already let in were all being, like, ushered out. And Briscoe notices a trail of slime leading into the bush. And they're like...
Oh, I've loved the fact that there was a trail of slime.
And they're like, oh, yeah, no, he was here. Like, Victor was here, and they find a sample that's alive, but we don't see it yet. Which they...
So I should mention Briscoe has specially developed grabby hands for it.
He has specially developed scientific grabby hands. If you're going to if you're going to do science, you need science grabby hands.
Yes,
it's important.
Great. Extendo grabby hands.
Yeah. And they're like, we don't even know what Victor would be at this point, considering what he's absorbed. Like, up to this point, he's absorbed a cactus, which gave him his manky hand, but, like, everyone else had been a person, so, but now he's absorbed multiple animals, so, like,
yep.
The fuck is going on?
Like, I'm going to guess a lot more animals that we did not see.
Yes.
Like, perhaps some things that are not just, like, deer and big cats.
Yeah. Back at the lab, they've taken the sample, and it's like it looks like a shit. A slimy shit. It's a gross blob thing.
Yeah. Is it pulsating at this point?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Yeah. I kind of love it, I'm not going to lie.
And they basically
it's a lump of fucking, like, living flesh. Come on.
Kinda. It's weird. And yeah, it's basically, it's absorbing anything that comes near it. So, like, there's a mouse in there with it, but they're like, oh yeah, it's absorbed, like, every other, like, living thing we've put near it. And you're like, how many mice did you feed to this thing, like, just to see what would happen?
Yeah.
And it's growing rapidly,
Science.
and they're worried that Victor may be growing at the same rate.
Mm-hmm. Don't worry, though, this sample they have is in a glass case with a, like, screw-down lid.
Yes.
Very safe.
Very safe. We then go to a police station where a homeless lady called Rosie, who's played by Thora Hird. If you don't know who that is and you're British, ask your parents. They'll tell you.
I know that name.
Yeah, famous old actress.
Yeah. Like the name resonates with me. I just can't think of them. Jesus.
Yeah, ask your parents. It's fine.
I will.
And reports that she saw something enormous, like crawling up a wall 30 feet high. Now, the officers are used to her, so initially they're like, all right, Rosie, what did you see this time? They're all very kindly with her, because she obviously comes in reporting seeing weird stuff all the time. And
it's more than likely, like, alcoholism-induced hallucinations.
Yeah. And like when they hear what she describes, they go, "Oh shit, this might be real. I think you actually saw something real this time, Rosie." And she's like, "You mean this time it wasn't a gin goblin?"
Yeah,
which is the best term.
That's a very Victorian thing.
Yeah. And upon realizing it, she might have actually seen something fucked up, because she's like, you police should be making sure this stuff isn't just roaming around to harass innocent women in the street. And they're like, no, this might be real. And she's like, oh, really? Oh, and then she just faints.
There was some sort of, like, how'd I put it? She was sort of desensitized to, because she just thought everything she saw might be a delusion.
Like, she'll still report it, but she kind of deep down knows that it probably isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment she's like, oh shit, no, that might have been real. Oh god.
Yeah.
So reports go out to Lomax and Quatermass, who go out to the area. They find his slime trail going up the wall, and they're like, yep, no, it's definitely him. Mm-hmm. So they evacuate the area. And that night at the lab, we see that the sample in the glass container has grown massively, and it breaks out of the glass container, trying to get at more mice to eat, but stops moving just before it gets a chance to get there, where Briscoe and Quatermass walk in and find it. Seemingly,
it had just died.
Yeah, I think it's the implication is that it needed food, and it ran out of energy, and it just died. Okay.
Because I was kind of like, wait, what?
It starved to death, basically.
Yeah.
And that's what caused it to break out. That makes sense. It's also covered in spores, and Briscoe's like, if it had gotten to the mice and fed, it would probably have been able to reproduce.
Yep.
Which would be bad. And they're like, how many more of these could be around London? And when are these going to hatch? Like, release spores, like...
How many like bits of flesh have fallen off of Victor in this time? Like
how like what's basically they have no idea what could happen from now on. Like it's an urgency is given to this, so they have an urgent search of London. Lomax on the phone title drops the movie saying like calling the army is like, oh yeah, no, we need to search. Yes, it's the Quatermass Experiment. It's not established whether he says it with an X or an E, so
fuck off.
I like to think he says it with the X. The army is alerted and they start searching the area.
Yes, we now see a nice montage with the soldiers searching around, including like in sewers and shit. It's like, you poor buggers are in sewers with bolt-action rifles. Good fucking luck to you trying to kill anything.
Yeah, like the public's noticed, like, if you see anything weird, don't touch it.
Yeah. Don't be a jackass.
We see that there is a live BBC show being broadcast about the restoration of Westminster Abbey, which they're apparently still doing this live broadcast.
Yep.
Even amidst all this, I guess time waits for no camera crew. As they're trying to put out the live feed, we see in like the van that's outside, the camera one is just dead. So they're like, oh, it's not working, because they've just put out like the public notice about, don't touch anything. And so they switch to camera 2, where it instantly cuts to the crew finding a dead body. So they kill the feed instantly. So if you're watching TV live at this point, you've just seen a dead body, so that's good. Yep. They call the authorities, basically saying bad things happen.
There's a dead body.
There's a dead body. And you see the outside of the Abbey, where we see a trail of slime going up the wall. Inside, the crew and the presenter decide to just carry on as normal.
The presenter's like, "Oh yeah, we can just carry on." Like, no, mate, crime scene.
I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be British stiff upper lip or sociopathy. It's one of the two.
There's a fine line there, isn't there?
I think it definitely veers into the latter.
Yes. Also, quick note: the producer guy, of course, this is why I noticed, Scottish guy, who runs the cameras and stuff. That is the actor Gordon Jackson, born in Glasgow and was in The Great Escape.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yes.
Ah, that's rad. Lomax arrives at the scene. He looks at the body and basically says, "You all need to leave now."
Yeah.
The crew refuse to stop broadcasting because apparently this mundane show about the restoration of Westminster Abbey is more important than human life.
You know what? Now that we've come to this point, I'm just going to say it's sociopathy.
Yeah. Lomax goes outside to talk to the producer to basically say, "What the fuck?" He speaks to the other guy who's there with him and is like, "Go get reinforcements. Like, go and get Quatermass and Briscoe and that lot as well."
Get everyone.
He finds the producers who are currently they're panning up the shot to look at the ceiling, and as it pans up, we see Victor.
Oh yes.
Victor at this point. Would you like to describe what Victor looks like at this point?
It's a Cronenberg-esque mess of tentacles, slightly octopus-like, but also not, with one eye.
Yeah, I described it in my notes as a 20-foot prickly octopus monster made out of alien genitalia.
Yes. Sorry, I should mention it's 20 foot.
Yeah, it's just squatting there on the scaffolding, being gross. It's made largely out of rubber and tripe. That's what the prop was made of.
Good work. Good work.
If you don't know what tripe is, that's a fun search on Wikipedia for you.
I could just tell folk, okay, we'll leave the mystery for them.
It's like the stomach lining of animals.
It's organ meat.
Yeah, it's kind of gross, and it looks gross. I've never eaten it.
It's so good for stuff like this.
Yeah, it's like that kind of stuff that people used to eat a lot more.
Yeah,
it was like an old food that poor people ate because it was from stomach lining and shit.
Yeah.
And yeah, they use that to make it, and that's why this looks so viscerally horrible.
Yeah,
because it is
legitimately looks. Oh god, now that you've actually said it's like stomach lining and stuff, I can totally see parts of it. Yeah, that was really good thinking.
There's some close-up shots of it that are genuinely, because it is just made of actual organic material, looks so...
It looks... Yeah, because at times I'm like, have they just put an octopus in there?
Yeah, I did wonder that.
That's the stomach lining.
Yep. It's gross. It's a thing, and it's just sitting up there squatting, slorping around on this scaffolding. Mm-hmm. The crew at this point go, you know what? Maybe we should leave.
You fucking idiots.
So they go. At this time, Quatermass and Briscoe show up.
Mm-hmm.
At any point have I called him Quatermass at any point during this?
I don't think so.
Because I kept typoing his name as that.
I wouldn't blame you.
I'm sorry if I did that. I've just realised, because I think I've typoed it that a couple of times in
I
the script.
Probably did as well. To be fair though, Quatermass is a very interesting name that you don't hear very often.
There's a story behind that, and I'll tell you about that later.
Yes!
They notice that when Briscoe and Quatermass come in, they notice that Victor has the same spores on him that the little one had, so he's gonna multiply soon. And they don't know how many more he's going to make. Looking at how many of these things on him, presumably it could be, countless, like more of him. And
this could be the end of things.
So, pretty bad. Quatermass quickly comes up with a plan. Basically, he wants to run all of the electricity in London through that scaffolding.
Okay, he did have some other ideas that he mentioned and was shot down by Briscoe because Briscoe is a coward. One of them was flamethrowers.
Yeah,
which would have worked. The other one was TNT. Maybe not the best idea inside Westminster Cathedral.
Well, they did say that might scatter the spores far and wide.
Fine.
The flamethrowers idea, though, I would also be behind the flamethrowers.
Yeah, because that's just 50s B-movie shit. It'd be great.
Yeah. But they hook up these huge-ass cables. The lights all over London go off as they're hooking them up to the main grid.
It's kind of great, isn't it?
The police are like, there's no cause for alarm. Like, policeman, there is cause for a lot of alarm.
Mate, I don't think you can continually say that and try and calm the populace when people realise that you're running, hundreds of meters of cable. We're not talking about just, standard cable. This is the heavy braid, thick as your arm shit into Westminster Cathedral. Come on now.
They carefully hook the thing up, sneaking in and hooking it up to the scaffolding.
Mm-hmm.
And the power's turned on. And
of course, by the classic sci-fi switches.
Oh, big switches. What's the point in flipping a switch if it's not a big, you got to feel like you're doing the whole Frankenstein thing.
4 fucking switches they hit.
You got to
2 people need to be there to handle all the switches.
If I ever have to activate power in something, I want one of those. I wonder how much it'd cost to get one of those fitted to my guitar amp.
Oh, mate.
So when you turn it on, I'd almost be tempted, that'd be a good thing for a really serious effects pedal. So
yes, I bet you already that exists.
So you go on stage.
Effects pedal people are weird.
And you want to go on stage and a guitar solo's coming up, so you hit the switch. Oh, I want that now.
Yes.
But anyway, they flip the switch and the electricity courses through the scaffolding and through whatever remains of Victor. Which...
Okay.
Do you want to describe this scene?
I don't know if I can... First of all, the thing is, florping around and, retracting tentacles and pushing them back out and spasming. It's really well done. The bit that gets me, though, is the screaming that is alien, but also you can still hear the human inside.
Yeah.
It's really effective. And this, again, the lack of sound in a lot of this movie really helps us. Or the lack of music, sorry, in a lot of this movie really helps.
I mean, some of it does cut away to a video feed of the scene as well, so you see this thing writhing in agony on fire at this point with no sound as well. Again, adding to this unnerving atmosphere to what's happening. Because it very quickly dies, but then we see quite a lot of it just burning. And there's these close-up shots of an eye of it, which is surrounded by tripe. Which, again, you look at that and you can't quite make out what you're looking at, but it adds to the credence of this being a living thing.
It looks like a real living thing because of the fact they use tripe.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that practical effects people nowadays should stop being cowards and start using fucking animal meat again, but there is a certain uncanny valleyness to it.
I think also because it's black and white.
Yes.
Black and white black and white makes some effects look worse, but it makes some effects look better because it covers up certain elements of them. And I think this is an effect that is made a lot better by the black and white.
Mm-hmm. And this is not just a old special effects thing, practical effects thing. This is a CGI thing as well.
Oh yeah.
Why do you think all the fights in the Godzilla movies take place, or the modern ones take place at night or in a storm?
Yes. And this is again, this is just a really well done effects shot. And so, Quatermass, Lomax, and Briscoe enter into Westminster Abbey and see this the twisted corpse amongst the twisted wreckage of the scaffolding. Smoke filled the air. Just look up at this burning corpse, and Lomax just turns to Quatermass and is like, well, you've won. Quatermass, just leaves the Abbey without saying anything. People coming up to him, asking him questions about what's happened, like, is it fine?
The dude from the Ministry of Defence comes up and just Quatermass doesn't say a word.
Quatermass just walks out, not a word, walks out of the place.
Now, before you go any further, we would think at this moment that it might mean that the character is rethinking what the fuck they've done and perhaps having like some development as a person and being like, I caused this. What happens next, Wib?
His assistant, Marsh, comes up to him and asks if there's anything he can do to help. And Quatermass responds, yeah, I'm going to need some help. We're going to start again. And if the movie ends as he walks off into the darkness of the London streets, and it fades into seeing a second rocket launching.
This man is a sociopath.
Nothing has been learned.
He did not change. He did not, oh my god.
And that is how the Quatermass Experiment ends.
Mm-hmm.
I really like this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good.
It's grim.
It's better now that I've talked about it with you.
It's grim. It's like not over serious. Like it knows when to have a little bit of a jokey moment or to have a funny moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it really handles sci-fi horror so well.
Yes, definitely.
That there are a few things I've seen that have handled that kind of line so well, and especially considering its time, I would love to have been able to see the original run, like in its entirety.
Even for the sake of just comparing the two,
Yeah.
I would love to. What did they change? How did they portray things differently? Stuff like that.
Yeah, well,
It's a reason that I might watch the 2005 version if it isn't just hot garbage, just to see how it changes things.
Well, we'll get into some of that because
at web time,
it's now time for Wib's Trivia Corner.
Need to get you a fucking jingle for that.
Yeah. I got a lot of work to do. The next one of these, you're doing the trivia.
You know what? I just do a run through and leave it. You go above and beyond every time, you son of a bitch.
This movie, after its creation, it's cited as one of the big reasons why Hammer got into doing horror.
That makes sense.
Because after this, they were like, "Oh wow, no, how we did this worked really well." And this, along with a couple of other movies that they have, because they didn't used to be a horror thing. They were just
a film production company.
Yeah, and they did all sorts. But this is what really started them down that path. So it's important in that regard. It was made for a budget of £42,000, which even at the time was considered to be so low that it wasn't that wasn't a real budget for a movie.
That wasn't a motion picture budget.
Yeah. There are some reasons for that. There were some behind-the-scenes shenanigans that meant that due to weird rights things with American distributors, the American actors in it were already paid for. I think the script got paid for as well outside of the budget. So there were things that weren't included in that. Now the guy who played, I forgot to write down his name. The guy who played Bernard Quatermass was an American, and the way he was played as this fucking no nonsense sociopath was different to his original portrayal in the serial. In the original serial, he was portrayed as a sensitive British scientist. Who showed remorse for the bad things that kind of had happened. And the guy who wrote it, who was called Nigel Neal, was not a fan of this interpretation at all.
It's Brian Donlevy, by the way.
Ah, yeah. Who apparently was drunk throughout half of this.
Again, studio system movies.
Yeah. They kept they were checking it's like his coffee was spiked all the time. They were like, oh, okay.
This isn't obviously old Hollywood, but it does have some connections. But old Hollywood was a fucking mess.
Oh yeah.
Like, people talk about it being like a hive of scum and villainy now. Oh boy, it was worse back then.
Let's just say the fact that the current studio system is slowly coalescing to be a handful of studios who have an outrageous amount of control is very similar to the old studio system, and there's a very good reason why that collapsed in upon itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but this now means that Disney can now make movies with Spider-Man. It does. Stop it. Stop it.
Monopolies aren't good. Anyway, let's not.
Anyway, because Nigel Neal had originally written Quatermass with this kind of more sensitive perspective, because the name Quatermass was chosen at random from a phone book. He just knew he wanted a name that began with a Q, because not many people have names that begin with a Q. But the name Bernard came from Bernard Lovell, who was an old British physicist and radio astronomer.
Oh, that's nice.
So he had in mind actual science. So he didn't like this kind of very mechanical, this guy who was he was a no nonsense mechanic, is I think the term that he used. It was so different from his interpretation. He wasn't a big fan of it. Now Richard Wordsworth, who played Victor Caroon, was picked because he had the right sort of face, and I totally understand that.
I agree. He's got the right face and the right body.
Yeah, he was spot on. His performance is often compared to Boris Karloff's in Frankenstein.
Yeah,
of being a great.
I would agree to that.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree with that, because he basically doesn't have any lines in the whole movie. Even when he whispers something to someone, it's in their ear. You don't hear it.
And he's also clearly not actually whispering. He's just going.
Yeah. Yeah. So he does a fantastic job throughout this movie of conveying this man who is so tormented and anguished by what's happening to him, and in pain and fighting against it and failing. Really, really great performance. The makeup was done by a guy called Phil Leakey, who again he would work for Hammer a lot in the coming years. He also made the shriveled corpses. He did great.
Fucking props, mate.
The other special effects, like a handful of matte paintings and composite shots and other bits and pieces, were made by a guy called Les Bowie, who worked on other Hammer films, as well as he did some of the mattes and composites for the 1978 Superman film.
Nice.
Now, the film was received positively, for the most part, as you would expect, given that it is a good movie. But there was one negative review that was mentioned on Wikipedia that I had to make a note of because it just made me laugh, which was by Frank Jackson of the Reynolds News, who said, "That TV pseudoscience shocker, the Quatermass Experiment, has been filmed, and quite a mess they've made of it," all one word, so it looks like Quatermass, quite a mess.
Okay.
I appreciate the pun, even if I disagree.
Points for effort.
Yeah. Now,
and also you're fucking wrong.
You're also wrong, Frank Jackson of Reynolds News. You're very wrong. You're probably dead, but you're wrong. And I know nothing about you other than this one review you wrote. You may have been a lovely person who was right about other things. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I think I'm just disparaging the dead at this point, and I should stop.
I'm just letting you roll, mate. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about the next bit now.
Please do.
This was not the only Quatermass thing. So, the same year as this adaptation of the original serial came out, a second serial came out called Quatermass 2. This was also adapted by Hammer into a movie, which I have not seen. And there was a third serial called Quatermass in the Pit, which was also
the one I know of.
Yeah, which was also adapted by Hammer. So these first three serials, all adapted by Hammer. All in the 50s, I believe. I think the last one's 59. I might be wrong there, but it's all in a kind of relatively short time span. Then later, in 1979, there was another series called Just Quatermass, which was also known as Quatermass 4, or the superior title, The Quatermass Conclusion.
Good. I like that last one, actually.
Which was rather fittingly produced by Verity Lambert. Now, Verity Lambert is probably most famous for being the producer on early Doctor Who. a show that was hugely influenced by the Quatermass series.
For sure.
And to continue the weird connections, in 2005, they remade the Quatermass Experiment and broadcast it live, just like the original one was, but as
that's awesome.
Yeah, as a single a single like feature length thing. So they adapted the original script but condensed it all down into a single thing. And this was shown on BBC4 Live. Now I've not seen it, but I know it contains both David Tennant and Mark Gatiss if you want any more connections to Doctor Who.
God damn it.
Apparently it finished 20 minutes early because they just went through it way faster, which they chalk up to like the nervousness of like them doing the whole thing live.
Yeah, that's understandable.
If I remember rightly from something I saw, you don't actually see the creature at the end of this live version, which I kind of understand because trying to get a special effect like that working live...
Yeah.
But
I kind of like them to add it in, but also,
it could also lend, like, you could get to a full-on Lovecraftian, indescribable horror thing. So, I mean, it already is, like, I would say there's a fair bit of a Lovecraftian vibe to this.
Well, if you consider what the fuck happened to them in space, definitely.
Yeah, there's a cosmic horror thing to it that, yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was my little bits of trivia. There is a ton about this movie because it is massively influential, and because of its intricate like connections to other things, and quite a lot of its like production has been like catalogued and stuff. It's a very interesting movie to read about as well as to talk about. But I ran out of time to keep researching trivia about this. So yeah, do you have anything you want to say about this movie before we wrap up? Because all I want to say is I really like this movie. I can see why it's one of my dad's favourites, and
for sure.
If for some reason you still haven't gone and watched it after we told you twice,
fucking go and watch it.
Go and watch it, but you have had it spoiled for you now, because I personally think this is a movie that is 100% worth going into without knowing anything about. Because
for real, just go and watch it.
The escalation of it, when you don't know what's going to happen, was something that I really enjoyed. Because, it ends in a big, silly blob alien thing, but like,
it doesn't feel silly
because it's established a baseline reality to this universe that means that it got to the silly sci-fi blob through sensible means.
Yes.
And I think it really, the movie really benefits from that. I enjoyed it. 100% recommend watching this one.
Yes. Seriously, go out and give it a watch. I think it's, especially if you've got like fucking Amazon Prime or something, it's right there and it's free. Just do it.
These Quatermass 2 is also up on there, the Hammer adaptation of that, which I haven't watched yet, but I absolutely will. But unfortunately, I don't have the time right now because I need to go and watch Ouija
DSV again?
No, I've got to go and watch Ouija Shark.
Yeah, you do.
For another podcast, which is... Well, I say I've got to watch it. I've got to take notes for it because I've already watched it. It's not as bad as you'd expect. I will say that.
We're not covering it.
No, we are not, because it's effectively we're stealing the format of this podcast over on the Misanthropod to do one about Ouija Shark. So,
you son of a bitch!
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Who's me in that scenario? Wait a minute.
Do you want to be Australian or do you want to be English?
Australian. Fuck being English. Fuck that entirely.
Yeah, that's fair. So Snipe is you.
Okay. I'll need to let her know that.
Okay.
So she can like get into character, because I know how method she is.
She is very.
So she might want to like chug like 4 liters of Jack Daniels and then headbutt a wall for a while before you start.
This is how you prepare for this podcast.
That's how I prepare for life, my friend.
You just wake up each morning.
Oh god.
So, good movie. I do just want to add one little thing, because this is not about this, because obviously we have our special thing coming up on the 10th where we're going to talk about Star Trek ships, whether you want us to or not.
On the 10th episode, yes.
which will be not the next one, but the one after that. And we currently haven't decided what the next one will be. So I don't know when I'll get a chance to talk about this when I've recently watched it. But I just want to add a brief thing that I watched through the entirety of Star Trek: The Lower Decks, and since it will probably be a long time before we get a chance to talk about it in this series, I just want to say I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad to hear that.
I was really shocked.
I was concerned.
I was concerned because the clip that they released of it, of one of the characters drunk and wielding a batleth, is the first scene of episode 1, and I think it is the worst scene in the entire show.
At the same time, I appreciate someone being drunk and wielding a batleth, but also, come on now.
It all shouting, just making references for the sake of making references. That's all there in that first scene, and I think it is the weakest scene, and it makes it look like the most knockoff Rick and Morty bit.
Yeah, that was honestly my worry.
And I'm not going to say that it doesn't occasionally go a bit overboard with fan service, and that if you're not into the kind of fast-talking, like, modern cartoon, like, kind of vibe, you still probably won't like it. But I think it manages to strike a balance between being Star Trek and being a comedy better
from what you told me, it sounds like, although it is those things you said, like it is a very fast-talking comedy cartoon made in this sort of era, it was made with a lot of love for the source material.
Yeah, and it has a lot of very deep cuts. Like, they literally mention the events of the Infinite Vulcan.
Yeah.
They mention Big Spock, so, yeah.
Big Spock is a thing that still exists, I guess.
Yeah, it's established to canonically
we still have to deal with that in our everyday lives.
It also occurs, like, I think I looked it up, it occurs, like, only a few years after Nemesis, so...
Yes.
It occurs before
Romulus. So there's still time before Romulus blows up.
Yeah, so Romulus still exists. And I don't want to spoil it, but the last episode has a few bits in it, like, calling back to old series that is fantastic. They take I won't spoil anything, but they take a jokey enemy from an old series, and they, rather than make them into a joke in this comedy series, they make them into a genuine threat. And which is really cool.
Like, for a comedy series as well, that's perfect.
Yeah, at some point I would like to cover...
Subverting expectations hard for the sake of a good laugh.
I would like to cover an episode of it on here at some point, but...
of course.
I am aware that there is a lot of Star Trek, and we cover it a lot because we like it a lot. And I don't want to make this like just a Star Trek podcast. So
yeah.
But it's really good.
I completely agree.
I totally understand people that didn't get on with it, but if you're on the fence about trying it, give it a shot.
Yeah.
Also, it's really nice to have Planet of the Week episodes of Star Trek again. I didn't realize how much I missed that.
Yeah.
Also, its theme tune's good, unlike Picard and Discovery. And I like Picard and Discovery, but like, fuck, are their theme tunes shite. Picard can get away with it a bit more because of the general tone of the show and like what it's doing, but Discovery's theme tune is just so bad. It's so boring and unmemorable. Speaking of,
you have started watching season 3, so have they changed the theme tune?
No, they haven't.
Fuckers.
It still sucks. But I will say, again, calling back to previous episodes we've done, I've watched the first episode of season 3 because that's live at the time we're recording this. Actually, it should still be the only one live by the time you hear this. If you listen to it when it's new, I don't know. What is time? Which is a fitting joke because the whole of Discovery Season 3 has a whole time travel aspect.
Spoilers.
Time travel, it's fine. It's in the fucking trailers. But no, it's... Let's just say there is an aspect to it that is riffing very heavily on Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, except...
But good, honestly, but good.
It doesn't have Kevin Sorbo in it, so it's better.
Yeah, honestly, as soon as you remove the Sorb, it's fine.
Also, there's a big cat called Grudge, and I love them, and that's great. Yeah, I enjoyed the first episode. I don't know. I would like to cover like something of Picard or Discovery in this series at some point, but the problem is that nearly all the episodes of it are like
a whole story arc kind of thing.
Yeah, you can't watch them on their own. There are a couple of like, especially Discovery season 1.
Right.
So maybe we should cover like, maybe there's like an episode with Harry Mudd. Maybe we should do that at some point.
I've never watched Discovery, so yeah, that would work.
Yeah. It's also before Discovery got kind of good. So
oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Or at least I learned to like not care so much about canon and just enjoy it for what it was, rather than being upset for what it wasn't. So yeah. But anyway, that aside, I just wanted to note that because obviously it's new sci-fi stuff that's been out, and I thought.
And we watched Web watched new sci-fi for once.
Hell,
rather than like, I don't know, sitting there to watch old Doctor Who or Sequest or whatever else the fuck.
I have been looking for what Sequest episode we should do for this series. I've not decided it yet because so many of the episodes require you to sort of know the cast a bit better, and I don't want to throw you into a complete deep end.
I do have to mention I did watch Sequest when I was a kid, remember?
Okay, then.
I'm not saying I have any memory of it, but when you mentioned Sequest one day and I said, yes, I remembered that show, it was surprising.
Yeah. I'm into season 3 now, so, you know.
Space Above and Beyond and God knows what else it's that, you know?
Yeah. I actually genuinely have been enjoying Sequest, even season 3 that apparently gets bad. But I've seen the start of it and it's got Michael Ironside in it, so I'm like, yeah, Michael Ironside. He's always fun when he shows up.
Yeah.
He's like the captain in season 3, so. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say, apart from go watch the Quatermass Experiment.
Fucking go watch it. I swear to God, go and fucking watch it. I'll batter you.
And so, yeah, if people want to find you on the internet, or indeed in real life, where can they find you, Longfang?
They can find me at twitch.tv/Longfang91 or at Longfang91 on Twitter. I am actually going to be putting up a tweet soon saying I won't be streaming tonight because holy fuck am I tired. Because I should be streaming in 40 minutes. Nah, I'm good.
And if you want to find me on the internet or in real life, you can't.
That's a lie.
Wib does tweets on Twitter, Snipe and Wib on YouTube, Santhropod podcasts, Snipe and Wib on Twitch, Wib does stuff on YouTube. That's all the important stuff.
And Snipe and Wib on Patreon.
Oh yeah, this is Patreon as well. Yeah.
I'm always going to pull you up for this shit though. I'm going to make a list and hang it on the wall and just a whiteboard list and then just tick it off each time we do a podcast when you say each one.
I'll just end up doing the intros and just introduce everything there just to get it out of the way. It's fine. People pay too much attention to me as is, so they should probably pay less. So that basically at the end when I'm giving plugs, I'm giving directions to unsubscribe from me.
I will ask Snape to batter you.
Anyway, that is the end of the podcast. It's reading on my thing as being just under 2 hours. So we're not as long as that one about Dalek. So that's good. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Goodbye, everybody at home.
Bye.
Bye-bye.